Alright, so we're in my garage and I'm about to throw this thing together. So basically, I'm getting a little tired of doing everything on camera, so I'm going to get this basically built up until there. I want to go over some stuff with you, but I just want to get it done at the same time. So I got some good bearings. These are, you can see, made in USA. They're MAL. I believe these are the P series. These are good steel-backed bearings. Like I said, you don't want to use the aluminum-backed bearings because what happens is they get hammered, and when they get hammered, they expand, and you'll end up with like basically chewing gum on your journals. So I spent a few years going to school for this. Not to talk about that, but I went to a couple of years of just city college and stuff like that. I took 2 engines classes and also 1 engine class for motorcycles. Okay, so first of all, when you have a connecting rod like this, you can see that one side has a chamfer on it. So one side right here is chamfered, and the other side is not. It's flat. Okay, so what this is there for is basically this is where oil will let out. So when you have 2 pistons, the way you orientate them together is the chamfer side is always out. So you find the 2 that are flat, and the two flat sides fit to each other, and the chamfered ones are on the outsides. When the chamfered sides are out, the oil is going to be going outwards. So the oil is going to be going off this side. The oil brings pressure with it. So if you put the 2 chamfered sides out, these will be pushing into each other, and that is how it should work. If you put the other way around, these will want to, with the oil pressure, will want to spread apart, and you don't want that. Now on the small block Mopar, there is one rod you should not be using, and that rod is the 3.9 V6 rod, because the 3.9 V6 rod has a split journal crankshaft, so there is no chamfer on this one. Okay, the next issue here is this should be checked for out of round. So what you can do is use an inside micrometer. I don't have one. The thing is, I'm not going to check this, because what I basically do is when I take an engine apart, I evaluate how much work it's going to need. Okay, and frankly, with my budget, if I take an engine apart that needs a whole bunch of work, I don't use it. Okay, so this thing came apart really easy. The crankshaft is not been ground. In fact, it's been polished. So if anything, it's smaller than it was. I'm using standard size brand new bearings. I'm just not going to have a problem with the fitment of this. But you can use an inside micrometer. If you could take it to a machine shop, they're going to put it, they have a machine on the wall that they put it into, and they turn a little thing, and it gets measured, and then there's a needle. So you've probably seen that. The little needle goes, and if you watch the needle, if it goes over like, I think 2 thousandths is okay. I think when you start getting into the 4.5, 5 thousandths, this is not good. It needs to be rerounded. Okay, and then this right here, what that does is this basically slings oil. So if you open this up, when the engine spins, this right here will take a little bit of the oil, and it's designed to sling oil on the opposite cylinder wall. So that's how that's one way that oil gets onto the cylinder wall. So when you put these together, you always put the notch side together. So notch to notch, and also look for the chamfer. If you have no chamfer, put notch to notch. All the pistons we have right here are using the same part number. So these are the same rod. Sorry, talking about the rod. So there's no reason at all we can't flip these pistons over and use them on the other side. It's not a big problem. The rod's the same. It's the orientation of the piston that makes a difference. So it's a good idea to inspect your bearings. There's layers. So it's just getting into the copper And this bearing actually looks pretty good. I mean, that's kind of a problem right there, but I could very well use these bearings over again. But I don't want to because basically when I build an engine, I don't want to ever have to go back and do it again. So we're just going to put new stuff in there. And I don't really want to, like after this is done, I'd rather spend money on other things. So I want to build this engine kind of like once and for all. Now what you can do with these, which I really don't do unless I need to, you can take this and spread it apart manually, but I just find that a lot of the time it's unnecessary. And I don't really like bending my bearing up too much when it just fits in just fine. Okay, so I want you to do this one at a time. Don't take them all apart and then just do it in one big operation. Do one at a time, and do not put one cap on another rod, because these caps have been driven, they've heated up and cooled down, and they've worked into each other. And you don't want to be putting the wrong cap on the wrong rod. So I looked at every rod I have, and I can't find any numbers on these things. Okay, so we found our first difference in parts. So check it out. We have this. It's an oil slinger. See how much oil can go out of there? And with the bearing that was in there, there's a notch. Okay, so that's really going to fling some oil. And then the bearings we have are going to cap that off. Okay, so that's getting capped off. Now, is that really a problem? Every one I've built, the bearings come like this. This is basically, I don't know if it's a special bearing or what, but it actually says made in Mexico 95. So I don't know, that could be an original bearing because it's a 95 block. But that's a really, really good bearing. But the thing is though, we're going to get so much oil coming out of this side right here that it's still going to fling onto the cylinders. It's not going to matter. That would have been nice, but I'm not going to go and cut a hole in my bearing just because of that. If you ask me, I'm not sure which is better, because that's an awful lot of oil to be letting go of. Like, the oil would definitely fling right out of that. And truthfully, it might be better to have these bearings and force the oil out the sides, which will take longer, so you'll end up with more oil on the journal for a longer time. Okay, so that's all of them, except that I forgot to clean one piston, so we can leave that there for later. Okay, so I got some rings also. These are some nice rings for the Magnum. They're basically the whatever they call for the chrome moly stuff. This is a top ring. The way you know it's top ring is because it's square, okay? And if it's directional, there's going to be a little dimple on one of the sides to indicate that it's directional. So one side has to be facing up. So that one's square. And then the second ring has a chamfer. You can see the chamfer right there. See that? The piston rings have a job of keeping the pressure from the combustion in the combustion chamber. Okay, so what happens is the first when the gas comes through, what the gases do is it gets behind the ring and it expands the ring. So the gases get behind the ringland, push it out, and there's so much force on the top ring that it's square. So it limits the amount of air that gets behind the ring on the first one. The second ring is not going to have as much force in the gases because the first ring knocked out most of the force. So the reason why that chamfer is there is to let gas get behind it a little more. The gas needs to get behind there and needs to have room to expand just a little bit more, so they give it some more room. Now, if you have a really, really high compression engine, like a diesel or something like that, I wouldn't be surprised to see 3 rings, but we only need 2 on this one. Okay, then what you have here is the oil ring. So these, okay, so you can see the oil has holes, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. So to disperse the oil evenly, you have something like this. If you didn't have this on there, you get, most of the oil would just fall right here. But you want the oil dispersed. So it tries to get out, it's met with interference, and it just slings it along the whole side. When installing rings, you can usually do it by hand. Of course, these are by hand, and then the little tiny rings that go around it. It's no problem. The second and third ring you can usually do by hand. You got to put it in a vise, but what happens is you end up, if you can't get it right, you put a big scratch right here, and you probably break one. So they make a tool. These rings are kind of small and flimsy, so I might feel more comfortable trying to find my tool and doing it that way, but I'll try one by hand first and see if it works. With these rings, people will try to tell you you need to clock them. And yeah, when you clock them, just put them up somewhere so they're not in line with each other. But if you were to get an engine and run it, and then take it apart, and then you marked exactly where you put the freaking openings, the gaps on the rings, it's not going to be the same because everything in an engine's turning. It's going to rotate and turn. It's going to go like this and end up over here and over there. So it really makes no difference. I'm not saying don't do it, but don't go crazy over it. The chamfer is on the bottom side on this end. So the chamfer doesn't go up top, it goes on bottom. So when checking gap, what you should do is put it in a bore. Run a piston down it so it's square. Do it for all the rings you have, and then check the gap. And then you have to get the measurement, which I don't really know what it is right now. But I'm going to do all this before I put them on the pistons. Okay, so it's about to go in. I have the pointer going to the back instead of the front, and I have checked. Basically, I have checked to make sure the offset is on the side I think it is. You might not be able to see it as well as I do, but it's a really small amount. It's better to go off of the chamfer than go off of a number. Okay, so this is the first piston going in the first hole. The chamfer is facing this way, and it's going to be the first piston in the journal. So that's how you do it. Better than going off of numbers on the rod. Okay, so what a lot of people do here is they put rubber, like hose or something like that over this. I don't really feel a need for this. What I do is put the piston, put the crankshaft at bottom dead center, and then just hold your fingers over it when you go down, and that's really all you gotta do. So I'm gonna get past the rings. Got plenty of space. Should go easy. If this doesn't go easy, start over, because chances are you're going to break a ring. Okay, so hold it with your fingers, just guide it over the the journal and watch it because you want to make sure that bearing doesn't go anywhere. Okay, got it. So people have different thoughts on using like a thread locker. So basically, when I build an engine, I build it so that it doesn't really come back out of the car. Like if this thing can last 20 years, that's what I want it to do. I'm not building it, and I'm going to rebuild it again in like a couple of years. So thread locker, I think the blue stuff's okay. You can even use the red stuff, really, but basically the nut has no problem with locking by itself. Once you tighten it down with a torque wrench, it's pretty much good, but this is just a little extra protection so it doesn't start loosening up on you. And it's like, why not do it, you know? Okay, I got my trusty Husky torque wrench, which I just calibrated myself. I know from memory that these things are torqued to 45. I put a little bit of blue on there. Okay, check both sides here. Okay. So that's one. So our next piston is going to have the mark going backwards, have a flat side, and chamfer facing out, like that. Okay, if you're using used parts, just use the part that's already shiny down. So I had two teachers. I think they had both last names Miller. One was Rob and one was Dave. I had Rob in Santa Rosa, California, at the JC, and he was a Navy guy. So Navy guys never leave anything to chance, and they always had all their ducks in a row. So what he taught me about building engines is that every time you do something to an engine, you spin it. So I spun it when I put the first one in. You guys didn't see it. Now I'm putting the second one in, and it's time to spin it again. So we're going to spin it every time we do something to it, and that way we know as we build it that there's nothing hanging up. And what you could do, see, what a person could do at the same time is when a cylinder goes to top dead center, it has a sister cylinder. So this one's a top dead center, and this one's a top dead center also. So you could do 2 at a time as you go along to save time. But if you do that, you're going to end up with a stuck motor possibly, and then you won't know which one it was that made it stuck. So you'll have to go through all of your work. But if you just do it 1 at a time, spin it, spin it, spin it, spin it every time, you'll know exactly where you were, and you'll know that nothing is stuck. And if there is anything wrong, you'll know where it happened. I had Bob Miller at Santa Rosa Junior College in about 2005-06. And it's funny because in San Francisco, I was actually neighbors with him. And when I was about 16, I knocked on his door trying to buy his Buick. He had like a 49 Buick with the fastback. And he did not sell it to me. Turned out it was his first car. But that's okay, because now I have my old 4-door here, so everything worked out fine. Okay. Like I say, right here, if this thing comes off and exposes one of your rings, you'll definitely crack it. I suggest getting the flat sheet metal kind. They have kinds that are different, but the flat sheet metal kind seems to work the best. Put a little bit of oil on it when you do it, you're fine. And then you just hold these things with your fingers and go right over the journal. You're fine. Okay, nice and smooth. Okay, so we're all done. Everything spins over just fine. Seems good. So here is a 360, and it has, see the casting right here. The journal's a little bit bigger on the 360. And here's a 318, you can tell. Journal's a little bit different. That's one way to tell if you just need to look at them. Other way is you have 3 freeze plugs kind of like together, and these are kind of spread out. So this one is my 318 for my Dart, and my Dart's kind of just hanging out for a little while over there. So it's going to be a while. I'm going to pair this thing with that AX15 right there, and it's going to be a pretty cool little car. So all this part right here, the gasket and the pan, I'm going to switch over to this one because I just don't have the money to buy it. That's about 140 bucks worth of shit right there. So that's what's going to happen now. And I have a timing chain and a tensioner for this one. So if you ask me, the 360 is the missing link in the Chrysler lineup. It kind of just ties the room together, okay? So the 360 is kind of like a big block and a small block package. But like we said, though, the small block ain't so small in the Chrysler. And then when you get to the big block, to me, it's almost like a small block and a big block package, and it's mostly because of the stroke. So the 360 is kind of almost a little bit of an oddball, too, just for the way the Chrysler did things. So on the RB blocks, this is a 413. When they made the RB block from the big block, they increased the deck height, they increased the rod length, and they increased the stroke. And that's how they made the RB block. When they made this one, everything stayed the same except for the stroke. So the deck height's the same, the rod length is the same, and they increased the stroke, but that's all they did. So this kind of has a little bit of both characteristics. So when you have a long rod and a long stroke, that rod really doesn't move around too much because the rod's so long. So you only have a certain degree of movement on the piston, okay? This one is a longer stroke, but the same rod and the same deck height. So I think that this thing is going to be dancing around a lot. It's going to be doing a lot of gymnastics under here. And it's amazing that they didn't give it a floating pin because of that. The 318 got the floating pin, but the 360 didn't. And I think the only reason why is because that the 360 didn't come around until about 71, and I think that they were just cutting costs. They wanted to go into the 360 without the extra stuff, without the extra cost. Because this thing probably could have used a floating pin. It probably would have been really nice for it. As you can see, hard for me to really show you this, but you can see that the degree of this thing, the degree of the pin is quite a lot. The 318 got a floating pin, but that's probably due to the high RPMs that it can possibly do, and also because just the longevity. So the airplanes use floating pins, and what happens in an airplane is if you start to lock up the engine, having multiple points of lockup is important on an airplane. So the piston has its movement point, pivot point, and then the rod does too. So if one of those locks up, you're still in the air. And that's kind of like what they did with the 318 because they wanted it to be the base model, the base engine, and they wanted to have, minimize problems in service to get a good reputation. I think they could have done it to this thing too, honestly. I think they probably would have needed it. And then you probably would have gotten some higher RPMs out of it, possibly. I don't really think it matters that much, honestly, in RPMs. I think it's more of something you want to do with an engine, but might not be exactly necessary. But basically, you're ending up with a 360. You're ending up with a relatively short rod, and then you're ending up with a longer stroke. But it's going to act more like a short stroke engine than a long stroke engine. It's going to act kind of more like a small block than a big block. It is a small block, but the long rod really goes a long way for a big block. And this is going to have kind of like both sides of characteristics, I think. Okay, so I like this pan right here, and I like, I'm using this this pickup. This pickup right here is a little bit different than the regular one. You got to get it, like if you want to order this pickup that fits that pan, just get the one off of the 3.9. And I know that the 360 has a smaller opening, but I'm just using this one. I think it'll be fine. So this pan's kind of cool because all the oil collects at the back, and also it's not incredibly deep, so it kind of acts a little bit like a windage tray. Also, it has these 3 little points right here. So what you do is you just cock this thing up, and then when you put the pan on, it flattens it out, and those points hit right here, so it gives it the perfect amount of space. So you don't gotta space it out. I have this pan on my Dodge Durango, and there was a little while when it was leaking a lot of oil from the plenum, and I was losing oil. And basically, with that pan, you can be low on oil and still have fine oil pressure. Oil probably gets hot, but you have fine oil pressure because it all collects in one spot. It'd be kind of cool to put some fins right here, maybe cool that oil down, but I don't know. So yeah, so I was driving my Durango in San Francisco once, and going down the hill, the oil light came on, and I was like, I checked my oil, I was like, pretty low. But because of the oil pan, I was fine. So I like the oil pan, and I am going to fit it in this car. I don't think it's going to be a problem. I think it's going to fit right in. I actually thought about making this, like cutting the bell off of here for a big block too down the road, just because I like it. So we're all done on the bottom. I torqued these down right here. I got them all facing back. So I have a camshaft. It's a comp cam. I kind of bought it a while back, and there's certain things I don't really like about it. So we're gonna fool with that in the next video. I'm gonna try to figure something out to where I can use it and be happy with it. Anyway, tune in, and we'll see how it goes. Thanks for watching.